Hey guys, welcome to another session of Epic 7. This is my initial thoughts video for ML Vivian or Sylvan Sage Vivian. I missed the Yoha version for the initial thoughts video, but it didn't really matter. I ended up kind of filling it with like a showcase video, an arena, and an RTA theory crafting showcase. But kind of like right on time, since Sylvan Sage Vivian is new ML5 after like 3 months of return and repeat ML5s for players to kind of catch up. Sylvan Sage Vivian, being a new one, I was hoping that she'd be a bit more hype, and when I say hype, I mean like mechanically broken, so that, you know, we'll all have to kind of adjust to like a sort of like a shift in the meta. But the way she looks at right now, like if I'm gonna give you the conclusion, the too long didn't watch version, is that I don't feel that she's that influential, but not like a C. Lilius, but yeah, maybe we don't need another type of C. Lilius. I'm just saying, like from a damage dealer perspective, it'd be interesting to have someone compete with like a Robbie Huayang, but that's not Huayang. Anyways, for these videos, I usually start with talking about the artwork or animation, as you guys know. So if you've been around, especially the community, the backlash, or the I don't even know what to say anymore, but about the Aria chest nerf, Sylvan Sage Vivian seems they took a preemptive approach and nerfing her chest. I mean, the original artwork, if you guys remember what that looked like, she had a bigger chest for sure, but I think they just preemptively nerfed it, so like maybe just future heroes just won't exceed a certain cup size. Now, I myself as a player, I don't really care, right? Like, you know, Spectenny is relatively flat, and because she's usable, I like her, right? She's waifu that way. I don't really care about it, but in terms of like, I had to bring it up because, you know, I'm an artist and all that. But I think she still looks good. In my opinion, the important thing is that they didn't nerf her thighs, and I'm a thigh guy, so I'm happy the way she looks right now. Some of the original S3 animation draft, they showed this in their kind of like a hype montage about like over half a year ago, which they also previewed ML Pavel. So if you're really low on mystics, maybe you wait for ML Pavel if you don't really like the conclusion of ML Vivian here. But yeah, this is some of the original version, and you can tell the chest there looks a lot bigger, but who cares? This is the polished version of the S3, the beginning of it. She kind of like grows these trees and gets lifted up into the sky. Look at that power pose. Look at those power thighs as well. I really like the approach of their, you know, their new S3 animations, and of course we know that like from the beginning, all the S3 animations have like the black backgrounds, so that Smilegate can kind of like mask or make it ambiguous in terms of like what location they're at, right? But then now they seem to have like really shifted the philosophy, and this has been the case since like, you know, OpSig and all that stuff. Very notable background shifts. ML Celine. Everyone now has like really cool backgrounds, and I think it's just like a philosophical change in terms of their art direction. Instead of being like, okay, keep it a black background so that it could be contextually makes sense anywhere you take your hero, right? So like in a snowy field, in some kind of like dungeon, in an underground sewer or something like that. Now they're just like, okay, let's make the S3s, the ultimates, like, you know, just like full-blown color, and make all the animations contextual to the S3 animation instead of contextual to the location that they're in. So in my opinion, I do like the new way of the philosophy, but just in case like you guys didn't catch on of why they changed that, it's not because all of a sudden they had better technology. I mean, it has nothing to do with tech. It has all to do with what made sense, I think, budget-wise, and then now I think they got more budget, and like I said, I'm pretty sure it's a philosophical art direction shift. This is some of the S3 animation, the polished version as opposed to like the draft version here. Very, very nice. I mean, you got your post effects, you got glows, you got blurs, depth of field, and then we end up with like this. Has some kind of like painterly look to the background. I really like that illustration because it gives you that kind of fantasy mythical feel. So like you're not really grounded. You don't even know like if these trees are like legit trees being grown out of the ground, or are they like, you know, part of some kind of, well, actually, you know what? I'm just making up stuff now. It's probably not an illusion, but you know what I mean. It gives you like certain distance, a state of disbelief. I like this kind of aspect, and then the kind of the glow and the amount of light that's coming in is very, very nice, very painterly. Now, if you're here for the stats and what I think about the kit, of course, let's get started. So, Sylvan Stage Vivian is a mage, is Cancer. Light Elemental, several mages share this type of stat line, but I think the closest one in terms of like the newest one would be like Milim. Milim has 18% self-attack imprint, but while she has a 16.8% crit rate, I mean, it is not... It feels like almost all of the ML5s, like especially a DPS, are getting crit rate imprints, and it's super high value. We all know this, so we don't need, like, I don't need to explain why it's such high value, but it is, like, outside of the speed imprints, it is probably the best value in terms of like like an imprint, right? Like, I mean, we've seen it like everywhere, like Lionheart, Syrmia, Dilabet, ML Celine, almost anyone that has the functioning role of being a damage dealer to some degree has a crit rate imprint, and it's good for players who have the imprints, but it really does lean into that kind of that commentary where people are just like, oh, this is a cash game, you know, they're only catering to the whales. Imprints were always good, but nothing is as good as crit rate and speed, of course. So it's kind of it's good for me, right? It's good for players who have the imprints, but it's just like, yeah, I don't know about that direction. They wanted to balance heroes, and Sylvan Stage Vivian, honestly, I think fits in the philosophy of newly released heroes trying not to be too overpowered. But at the same time, it's like releasing the imprint concentration of 16%. I don't know. Feels kind of baity to me. That's all I have to say. Either way, the stat lines are, as you see on screen there, 1359 attack. It's very, very high. Almost 1400. You got your health at 4895. This comes into play when I talk about her theorycraft in terms of build and, you know, her survivability. Speed at 110 is very nice. Defense at 652 is pretty average for a mage. And then 23% innate crit rate, very, very nice. But then if you have a triple S, you're looking at almost a 40% crit rate hero right off the bat before you even slap on gear. So, you know, that's a super high value imprint on top of the fact that she has pretty good awakenings. And for her kit, in my opinion, nothing is wasted here. So yeah, that's that. Let's go and talk about the skill 2 passive is the first one being introduced. Insight. So at the start of the first battle, it gains 3 focus. So it starts with 3 focus, unless Solitary is on the field, by the way. And at the start of the turn, gains 1 focus. When attacked, if expected damage suffered is equivalent to 25% or more of the max health, consumes 1 focus, decreasing damage suffered by up to 70%. So 50 is the base, 70 being the skill enhanced if you +5. And after being attacked, decreases the skill cooldowns of the caster by 1 turn. And then when more than one damage reduction effect is granted, only the strongest effect is applied. This effect applies to heroes only. So let's run this backwards. All right, so the effect applies to heroes only. I just think that it just means that, you know, it's only going to work within a PvP scenario. So if you bring her to a PvE thing, like, don't expect her to tank Wyvern or something like that. Like, even if you would use her, you probably not, but I think that's what it means there. When more than 1 damage reduction effect granted, only the strongest effect is applied. Maybe this is just in case in the future there's some kind of like insane knight that is able to reduce damage up to that degree. I guess better safe than sorry to have that, you know, written really strict, like they don't stack pretty much. So like you can't put her like on a proof of valor, or, you know, a C Armin's passive won't stack on top of this, stuff like that. But of course, as long as you know that the different mechanic between damage reduction and damage sharing, are two different systems, then you can see that this is still a very OP skill, OP passive, because this can be paired with Aureus, can be paired with a Troublemaker Closet. Any damage sharing effect will stack with the damage reduction, as you know, with Proof of Valor and all that other stuff. So at the start of the first battle, gains 3 focus. So like I said, let's take out well, let's talk about her flaws right away, right? I never believe in the sense that because she's weak to something it makes her bad. And even if she's weak to a meta hero, that does not necessarily make her bad. But because right now I think what I've seen in World Arena is that the roles of heroes, we're getting a lot of heroes, right? A lot of heroes, and especially end game players, and even more so whales, have the ability to gear many heroes very well. So therefore their roster is very strong. As long as the roster and the gear is strong, it makes even someone like Sylvan Sage Vivian, if you don't believe that she's good, it makes her even viable. So let's just say that. But right away, because she's a focused hero, it makes her weak to Solitaria. I can't even say how many times, as I was climbing in World Arena, how many times people make the mistake that, you know, they drafted Aria but have Solitaria, but they kept Aria. Like, well, they kept my Solitaria in, and so, like, you know, sometimes we forget about that, right? It's like, so Solitaria counters SSB, counters Rylet, but then you kind of forget, like, Aria is also a focused hero. So if ML Vivian, you know, is focused, then, you know, Solitaria might have an issue with that. This is a passive as well, so remember it's also sealable. And Sylvan Sage Vivian kind of thrives on AoE, in my opinion. Thrives on AoE as one of her strong suits, so probably weakened to someone like Archdemon Shadow, who can seal the passive, and she's pretty much dead on the next turn, like guaranteed. So, you know, get those out of the way. But so does that make her, like, I would say Solitaria and Archdemon Shadow, generally they're drafted as kind of like standard comps, right? So, like, does that make Sylvan Sage Vivian slightly weakened to standard? I'm not quite sure about that. Like I said, if you're thinking about, you know, what hero is weak to what, you can honestly come up with a lot of counters for stuff, you know? But when we're talking about, like, competitive PvP, especially World Arena, we have to start thinking about in comps. In my estimate is that if you're going to use Sylvan Sage Vivian, and if she proves to be very useful, you'll most likely start drafting her around slot 3 to 5. I actually just got a follow, even though I'm not streaming. I'll just keep that in the recording. So I think in terms of usage, slot 3 to 5. So if she's draftable around slot 3 to 5, and you're gonna be drafting her, making sure that she's obviously going to be strong against certain things. Like, I think she's pretty strong against Landy, probably Specteni, maybe even Hua Yang, if you can ensure Hua Yang doesn't have a soul, have soul burn. I think she could be pretty strong. So, but there's a couple things that you have to make sure when you think about, like, heroes like Sylvan Sage Vivian, is that you have to go through certain checks, like what is she actually weak to. So she'll be weak to Rimuru, she'll be weak to Solitaria, she'll be weak to someone like ADS. So just with the passive itself, it's like, it deals with a lot, in my opinion. It deals with a lot. I don't think it deals with I don't think it deals enough. Let me continue on this skill first. I want to kind of compare it to ML Celine in a bit. Okay, so gains focus when attacked, right? So when gains 1 focus at the start of the turn. So you're basically, at her turn, she's gonna have 4 focus. When attacked, if expected damage is suffered is equivalent to 25% more of max health, consumes 1 focus, decreasing the damage suffered by 70%. So we have a screenshot here, well, at least I have a screenshot based on the video. They used Remnant Violet, who has elemental advantage, and then also in this screenshot, vigor buff from C. Lilius. Now I did run into the damage calc, and this is it's a decently well built Remnant Violet to do that kind of damage to Sylvan Sage Vivian. The only thing would be, like, I had to estimate Sylvan Sage Vivian's defense. So defense does of course change it a bit, but when you're talking about raw damage mitigation up to 70%, that's really huge. That's a huge cut in damage, right? So like it doesn't matter like how much more like crit rate or crit damage or attack that the Remnant Violet had, it actually wouldn't make that much of a difference. There's only so much, the stat ceiling can only go up so high. So if you think about it this way, right, mathematically speaking, 100% damage mitigation equals 0 damage, right? So like it doesn't matter if you have like 5,000 attack, 350 crit damage, vigor buff with attack buff with gab, it doesn't matter, you're not going to do any damage, right? So that's the power of very high damage mitigation in terms of raw damage mitigation. 70% is no joke. I put a lot of heroes into Maffy's damage calculator, Spectenny, Remnant Violet, anyone that does like, as you can see here, expected damage, anyone who is scaling on crit damage, or just pure damage itself, it's just like you're not doing a lot of damage to her, you know what I mean? So okay, so obviously there's like a criteria, 25% or more of her max health, which isn't too bad. I was trying to build the Sylvan Sage Vivian using Milim as a base, and I was able to get her to like with decent damage, like 280 crit damage, 4k attack. Let's just neglect what this type of set is. I did it both on a lifesteal set and a speed set, so don't care about the speed and whatnot. So 100% crit rate, and I tried to give her some defense. I only got her to about 1300 defense, but HP was like around like 10,000. So if we're talking about like 10,000 to 12,000 HP Sylvan Sage Vivian, 25% of her max health is very easy to achieve in terms of the expected damage. So I think, I mean, although it doesn't go into explanation, I think the expected damage is pretty self-explanatory. I believe expected damage just means the damage that's going to go into her before any sort of external damage proc. So like a Briar Witch passive, Rengar Specialty Drink, Uberius Tooth pop, Rimru's flat damage that gets added after the fact of his S3, all that kind of stuff. All the damage that goes on before it is expected damage. Anything that goes beyond that, like burns, detonations and stuff like that, those won't be expected damage, I believe. So like so she'll be weak to like a ML Kawazu in my opinion. ML Kawazu should be able to one-shot her easily. Stuff like that, right? So that's what she'll be weak to. But what she might be strong into is stuff like Spectenny, Remnant Violet not really meta at the moment, but maybe Landy as well. Because she could output AoE quite easily and has like not a huge risk of losing to Landy, especially turn 1, because she can heal. So yeah, so yeah, reaching the 25% or more health, it should be pretty easy. Like I said, I think very good gear gets her to about 12,000 HP, unless you're going to lower your damage a lot, like attack and crit damage. But let's say 10,000 to 12,000 HP, I would say is pretty fair on her with all the stats that you might want to get. Okay. Yeah, so and then every time it does trigger, it decreases the skill cooldown. So that part is important when we talk about the S3. So let's move on. So as I showed the screenshot there, obviously they're showcasing the amount of damage she can absorb. If you think about it in this way, she doesn't function as a knight, but in terms of her survivability, she does. Like I did some damage calcs again, like I said. Spectenny won't be able to kill her in a Soulburn S1, S2, S3. That's with pen set, that's with attack buff. Especially if you have Aureus. If you have Aureus, there's no way she dies to a 2-tap Spectenny. Without Aureus, it does depend on your stats, and it does depend on the opponent's Spectenny stats. But roughly speaking, you're almost not killing her. So in terms of, you need 3 attacks as strong as Spectenny's damage to be able to kill her. Alright? So like in one go. If you can't, then she becomes pretty strong. If you have Aureus, if you have barriers, it becomes really strong. Chatty is a predominant theory crafted artifact right now because she has pretty high attack base, like you saw. and then she stacks attack, and then if you have providing an external attack buffer, which is pretty easy these days, we have those kind of really filled out. ML Charles, Peyra, we got Vigor buff as an attack buffer as well from C. Lilius, Amelia, DN. We have a lot of these kind of openers. So like Sylvan Sage Vivian in most scenarios probably will have her attack buffer before she gets a turn. So that means that Chatty becomes highly effective. So if Chatty does proc, and which if you have it at max limit broken it would proc, there is no way like someone like a Spectani would kill her. If you pair her with an A-Ross taking in single target damage, you got that fat barrier from him as well. So there's a lot of things going for her, and keep in mind, even if she gets a barrier, Op Sig will not be able to kill her. Well, actually I'll probably have to run that damage calculator, but most likely not be able to kill her, especially with Aureus. So there's all those kind of things. So she'd be good into it. It's kind of like, she kind of reminds me of those the thing where it's like you're punching like a brick wall. So like the harder you hit a brick wall, like the more damage you're gonna receive. This is not reflection, okay? And this is like, you're not reflecting damage here, but it just feels like she is like meant to be taken into like very high damage comps. So like, you know, the harder you hit, the less she actually gets. It reminds me of like some kind of like X-Men or something, some kind of mutant power. If you guys know what I'm talking about. So yeah, so overall, I mean, oh, actually in the screenshot, you should keep in mind though, Peyra has her escort buff up. So that's 30% damage mitigation. So maybe she doesn't even survive Rowlet that well. I'll have to redo the calc, but from my Maffy damage test, she can survive S10, she can survive a Landy and S10 if you have a mitigation. And I think she does deal with Landy Specteni together pretty well. That's a pretty popular draft, especially if you have a C. Lilius band. And then you have like a DN or ML Charles opener, and they have drafted like Huayang A. Ravi or something, like heavy single target, and it's too late, they can't get enough AoE. That kind of draft is pretty strong, so she might be a really strong, like a one hero that deals with both. So that might be a decent thing. I know that the more I explain it, it makes me sound like I don't think she's that good. But anyways, skill 3, Nature's Judgment. Attacks all enemies by bringing forth the power of nature. Increases the critical hit damage of all allies by 2 turns. Recovers health before increasing attack of the caster. Amount recovered increases proportion of the target's max health, and then increase attack can stack up to 3 times. So I do have the data mine for this one. You have a 20% heal. Okay, 20% heal off the bat without the Mola affecting the heal. So 20% of the target's max health. That's quite a lot. So I feel like if you don't use her in some sort of aggro draft, she's very good counter aggro, in my opinion. Counter aggro, I don't know about counter cleave exactly, but counter aggro for sure, I think she could have a play. And then thinking standard draft, again, as long as you bypass all the checks, the Rimuru, the ADS, the Solitaria checks and all that stuff, and all the other stuff that she might be weak to, Huayang having access to book. Once you have all those out of the way, and I think she could work in standard draft as well, maybe on lifesteal set. Because she has the self crit rate, this makes her easier to build the Milim on lifesteal. You'll have lower attack as a result, but you know what? I don't think it's a big deal. Because if you have her on lifesteal, then you have healing on S1 turns, you have healing on the S3 turns and Nate, and then she has a high supportive element for your team, right? So if you think about it this way, like the critical hit damage buff on an attack scaling damage dealer is very minimal. So like someone like Flan, when she can, you know, crit damage buff and attack buff and CR boost in all in one turn, realistically it's like attack buff is the biggest thing. Crit damage buff is slightly beneficial, but if you guys run any type of damage calculation, crit damage, especially crit damage buff, it doesn't add as much damage as let's say an attack buff, right? Even a 50% attack versus 50% crit damage, it generally ends up being the attack buff is stronger, especially on attack scalers. Now, I don't mind this being crit damage because, like I said, I think we have a lot of AoE attack buffers right now, and I would say all of those ones that I named before are meta. So if you have her as another attack buffer, especially if she doesn't really have the function to be like an opener because she doesn't CR boost and her base speed is not even that fast. If she doesn't have that function, then why have her as an attack buffer? I know that I've heard complaints of people saying, why crit damage buff? Why not like something like more useful? Crit damage buff, in my opinion, yes, it's not the most useful buff, but it's useful for her too. It's useful for HP scaling bruisers, right? So like in my opinion, it's like okay. Like I'll take it, you know, I'll take it. I think that the saving factor for the S3 honestly is the AoE that it comes with, and also AoE heal. So those two things are like the biggest things for me. And then the critical hit damage increase, you know, like I think Ilanav has that AoE as well. I mean, that wasn't a really big deal on Ilanav, and in my opinion, it's not a big deal on her. But if you think about it again, like if you have like Peyra or an ML Charles or a DN, you already have an attack buffer, so maybe getting the crit damage buff is not too terrible, right? So at least you're not overlapping buffs. So that's my opinion on it, at least. Yeah, but the AoE healing, those are really good. The increased attack that stacks up to 3 times, it is not something like Landy where it's like 20% 3 times, so she gets 60% attack buff on her third turn or whatever. This is 15%, so it's only 45%, less than a regular attack buff, but 45% is not nothing. The issue is that it does become quite hard to trigger. Like first things first, like you would have to trigger her passive, her S2 multiple times in order for this to kind of stack, right? So in a regular, even in a standard fight, you might not see 3 stacks when the fight is over. If you have her on lifesteal and you plan to like really stall it out, yeah, sure, I think you're gonna see the 3 stacks, but at that point, if you're playing World Arena especially, like wouldn't the RTA Frenzy just kind of take over? Like, so I think the attack stack here is a bit of a... I think it's a bit of a conservative move in terms of Smilegate's design. I just don't see, like, outside of you having Chatty or maybe you have a healer, like I don't see her getting, like, she's either dead or you're not getting enough of the focus reduction in order to get this turn cooldown, you know what I mean? So I almost feel like if they had the attack stack be as strong as Landy, so like 20-20-20, so eventually being 60, I don't even think it's that bad. But the very fact that they had to make it like a 15%, 15%, 15%, it feels very conservative. So I feel that they're a bit afraid, and I get it. People complain when they're super OP heroes. And then people kind of complain when they're kind of like bleh, right? So I'm giving the impression that it's kind of bleh. It acquires 1 focus even when she does the S3, so just keep in mind that as well. That's really good. It just keeps that all her skills are gaining her focus in term and including the turn that she gets. So realistically, and also you also need focus in order to have the damage mitigation, by the way. So like if somehow someone burns out all your focus, then you're not getting that damage mitigation. I don't know what kind of scenario it would be able to burn it down before you'd be dead anyway. All my calculations say that high enough damage heroes, you will kill her at least in 3 shots. I don't think she survives 4 or 5 shots. So that's just something to note. Maybe I should bring up the ML Celine thing right now. So ML Celine is a very, very tricky hero to deal with if drafted last. Okay, or actually even fourth, 5th pick. She works in both slots. She becomes a tricky one, and I think Sylvan Sage Vivian is leaning more towards that kind of aspect. Although I feel that like ML Celine's like revive becomes a real big hassle. if the opponent you're fighting, they can't sustain. So like she's almost a force ban, but she only does like single target, right? Whereas Sylvan Sage Vivian has the heal, so it kind of supports as well AoE. But she can deal with AoE, like she can deal AoE rather. So and she has controllable S1, so you can choose it to be AoE if you want, if you have the souls, or you could go single target. So there's like, I see some similarities in the two, in terms of like, you know, when can you use them, and both of them actually struggle with very similar heroes actually in terms of counter draft. But anyways, that being said, I do think that the S3, the saving grace is really the heal. In my opinion, that's the biggest thing, and it does AoE damage. It's also a 1.1 times mod. I should not overlook that actually. The damage for the S3 is actually pretty decent for an AoE. Arbiter Vildred at base, he doesn't have a 1.1. If he soul burns and then has full focus, yeah, sure, his S3 does a lot of damage, but 1.1 for an AoE is very, very nice. Okay, it's pretty strong. And then consistently on the S1, it's a 1 times mod. If you soul burn for AoE, it also remains as a 1 times mod. So again, that's still very good. You do not acquire focus here though, in the in this skill. All right. Attacks an enemy with mana, increases speed with cast with 1 turn. The 1 turn speed buff, it reminds me of ML Crow. I don't know how zooming she'll be. I mean, every bit of speed will help the fight, in my opinion, but I am not 100% really sold on it. I suppose it's better than CR Boost S1, because CR Boost S1 is honestly overplayed, and like, you know, and then when CR Boost S1, everybody's gonna be like, okay, then counter is also viable. I'm kind of glad it's not CR Boost, but then at the same time, it's like, if it's not CR Boost, then does it feel a bit weak? I do like the fact that the soul burn 10 soul only can attack all enemies AoE. It does not trigger a dual attack, so in the sense of like, you can control this to either you want to drive an AoE, maybe knock Landy out of Guiding Light, or you don't want to trigger an accidental dual attack into Lionheart Syrmia. I've been watching a lot of RTS streamers and myself. When you're fighting Lionheart Syrmia and you don't even mean to do a dual attack, you just do a dual attack on the turn that she was just about to go, and of course then she wipes your whole team, right? So for Sylvan Sage Vivian, if you cost a cost of 10 souls, it's quite cheap. You guarantee that will never happen. So that's one benefit of this. I like the controllable S1. I like that ability. This is something that ML Celine kind of always kind of pisses me off about, because ML Celine, like, she can deal with stuff, but like, she has 1 attack, and that attack is RNG heavy, right? So if you're on Dust Devil, you have Dust Devil RNG as well, but you have that 30% chance not to proc that the higher damage one. And without proccing the higher damage one, you don't even dispel yourself. So like, sometimes you get provoked and stuff like that, and you know, kind of nasty not being able to do it. So ML Celine has like a way less controllable like fight, you know, fighting chance. Whereas I think Sylvan Sage Vivian, again, if I'm using the two to compare, has a way better like control. Like, you don't even need to S3 on turn 1 technically, except that I guess you'll waste the damage mitigation cooldown mechanic. But you don't even need to do the S3 right away. Like, you could literally try starting with S1 if you have her on book, or you have an additional book holder you want to do AoE, or you could just improve the speed and then heal later when everybody actually needs a heal. 20% target max health heal is not nothing. It's very, very powerful in my opinion. So yeah, so that's pretty much it. That's all my thoughts on her. Artifacts I already talked about. I think Chatty is the theory crafted one, because she's a mage and she can benefit from her own book. I don't see how book could be a bad option either. I didn't really think about other artifacts, because at the end of the day, like we say like, oh, you know, Carrot can use Etika Scepter or whatever. At the end of the day, if Bellion is banned or Bellion is not played, like book on mages is just incredibly insane. I can't even think of many mages that don't benefit from book outside of maybe like Archdemon Shadow. Like even Solitaria benefits from book to some degree. So like yeah, so I think book is safe. If you have Chatty plus 30, like why not try it out, right? I think it will make her so tanky, very hard to kill, and I think its Chatty is a 2-turn barrier too. So it's like it's actually pretty good. What else? Builds. Yeah, so like I mentioned lifesteal build. I think lifesteal build for Banshee gamers specifically, they'll have access to the right pieces. Especially she's not like a super unique hero, like someone like a Arya, who needs also ER or something. So it'll be easier to build her, and I'm pretty sure Banshee games will have the gear ready when she's released if they're going the lifesteal method. Speed is really hard to get on her, to be honest. Even with the 16% crit rate, I put her on a speed set. You get like maybe 250 decently easily. 260, 270, you start losing on some damage. So if you go for like the speedier aggro build, maybe you go with like 250 speed and then kind of rely on a DN, a Peyra, or ML Charles. You know, it depends on what kind of pusher you can start using for your aggro draft. But I think she could be good against aggro. I think she could be decent into standard. I think she could be pretty good into even when you use her into an aggro comp. So those are my kind of like areas where I think that she'll be usable. In terms of full team comps, I think I gotta rely, especially I myself, gotta rely on like the RTA geniuses to kind of figure out where she works. But I think on paper, I think she's usable. In my opinion, any hero that brings out a new mechanic, and even if you can't imagine how that mechanic will work, for her specifically, in my opinion, her main mechanic is the damage mitigation one. A hero that brings in kind of like a new mechanic into the pool, generally speaking, a lot of people can't like fully assess it, but in my opinion, this has potential. It has potential, but like I said, right now World Arena is heavily reliant on like huge rosters, and ideally your full roster is well built. For players who are able to pull that off, I think you'll be able to use ML Vivian way easier than someone who doesn't have those things in their account at the moment. Anyways, that's my initial thoughts for ML Vivian. This has been a really long one as I've been kind of circling around a couple skills and a couple thoughts. But hopefully this has been informative, and hopefully you have enjoyed this video. I'm going to end this for the video recording. If you have Discord, check out the Discord server. Follow me on Twitter, subscribe to YouTube if you haven't. And as always, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.